Welcome back, everyone. Today we're going to do a deep dive into something pretty interesting.
Okay.
It's perceptions of a statement, and that statement is white people invented slavery.
Hmm.
And we're going to use data to help us in this deep dive.
Cool.
We're going to use the 2024 presidential election survey, which, it's a survey.
Right,
It's a
yeah.
big survey. It was over 3,000 American adults.
Okay.
And it covered all sorts of topics, politics to social issues. But the thing that really stood out to us
Yeah.
was an unexpected gender gap in the responses to that statement about slavery.
It is fascinating,
Yeah.
because on the surface,
Yeah.
you would think that opinions on a historically charged topic like that would be pretty consistent,
Right. Yeah.
across demographics.
Yeah, exactly.
But that's not at all what the survey found.
Right. It really makes you wonder, what's going on? What's driving these differences?
Awesome.
Yeah.
Are you ready to dive in?
Yeah, let's do it.
Welcome to Gender Decoded, when numbers align, seeing the stories that data defines, breaking the barriers, truth untold, insights in gender, the data falls.
Thinking historically, you might already be thinking about, all the facts that go against that statement. And
Yeah.
you know what? You'd be right. Slavery has this long, tragic history that goes back thousands of years. I mean, all across different cultures. And you know what? We're not here to debate the historical accuracy of that. We're doing a deep dive today into the 2024 presidential election survey, specifically a question that asked respondents whether or not they believe that this statement was true or false. We want to explore how people today view this statement, such a loaded statement, and what that says about society.
Yeah, I think it's fascinating because this isn't just about a historical fact, right?
Yeah.
It taps into some pretty deeply held beliefs about race,
Yeah.
about power, and who we hold responsible for historical wrongs, especially here in the United States.
Totally. And the survey results had some interesting findings, especially when we break it down by gender.
Yeah, the data actually revealed a consistent pattern that I really didn't expect. It turns out that in every racial group surveyed, everyone, so we're talking white, Hispanic or Latino, blacks or African American, and Asian or Pacific Islander women were more likely to agree that white people invented slavery than men were.
Yeah, and it wasn't just a small difference either. This gap was pretty big across the board.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we're looking at a difference of 7 to 14 percentage points depending on the racial group.
Yeah.
So, for example, we have 59% of Hispanic women who agreed with the statement, but only 47% of Hispanic men agreed.
Wow, so that's over a 10% difference right there. So were there similar gaps in other racial groups?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Among black respondents, 60% of women agreed versus 51% of men. And with this consistency across racial lines, it seems like there's got to be something deeper going on here, something beyond just racial identity.
So what could be causing this gender gap? Why are women, regardless of their own race, more likely to believe that white people invented slavery?
Well, the authors of the survey suggest a few possible explanations, and they all kind of point to how men and women might experience and learn about the world differently. One factor they point to is education and socialization. If you think about it, women are often more exposed to conversations about things like systemic oppression and historical injustices, both in their education and also in their involvement in social movements.
Yeah, that's a good point. Just looking at the history of so many social justice movements, women are at the forefront, organizing, advocating, and raising awareness about inequality.
Exactly, and that engagement that they have could actually shape how they view historical events, including slavery.
The survey authors also mention empathy as a possible factor as well. They suggest that women tend to report higher levels of empathy, and that could make them more receptive to narratives about historical oppression.
Right. And empathy, the ability to connect with the suffering of others, can be really, really powerful, especially when you're learning about something as horrific as slavery.
Yeah.
It lets us understand the human cost of those historical injustices, even if they happened a long time ago.
Yeah, it really makes you wonder if this greater sense of empathy could be influencing how women are understanding and interpreting the history of slavery.
It's definitely something worth looking into further. And then When you think about the experiences of women of color, and specifically women of color who, so often face discrimination because of their race and because of their gender, it gets even more complex. They might view transatlantic slavery as like a key part of how white-dominated power structures were formed. And that, in turn, could lead them to view it more directly as white people inventing slavery as a whole.
So you're saying that their lived experiences could shape their understanding of history in a way that's just totally different from how men of color view it, or even white women.
Exactly. And it highlights how important it is to consider intersectionality, how different aspects of a person's identity can overlap and impact their entire worldview.
Now, we've talked about education and socialization and empathy as possible factors here, but could it also have something to do with the information that's just circulating in society today?
For sure. Over the past few decades, there's been a huge shift in how we talk about the transatlantic slave trade. It's become a much bigger topic, in the media and documentaries and books, even on social media. And while that's really important, it could also be unintentionally contributing to a very simplified view of history.
Oh, so you're saying that by focusing so much on the transatlantic slave trade, it might give people the impression that it was the only kind of slavery, or that it was something that white Europeans created.
Yeah, that's the risk. And while this period was undeniably brutal and a defining chapter of American history, it's crucial to remember that it's just one chapter in a much larger story. Slavery has existed in so many forms across different cultures and civilizations for thousands of years.
It's like we're so zoomed in on a single tree that we forget we're standing in a giant forest.
Exactly. When we zoom in too close, we miss the big picture, all those nuances and complexities of history. And that can have real consequences for how we understand the world today.
Now, you mentioned earlier how important it is to look at lots of different sources of information. Can you talk about that more?
Yeah, textbooks and documentaries are great, but we shouldn't just rely on them. We should try to find primary sources whenever we can, like firsthand accounts or letters or diaries. Those give us a more personal look at the past.
And I'm guessing those primary sources can help us hear from people whose stories aren't usually told.
That's a really good point. We have to actively look for perspectives from marginalized groups, the people whose stories have been ignored. We need to broaden our understanding of history and go beyond what we were taught.
So we should question everything, be curious, and try to find the missing pieces.
Exactly. And this is the most important part. History isn't just about the past. It's still relevant today.
You mean how it shapes our understanding of who we are and where we came from and the problems we're facing now?
Yes. How we interpret the past has consequences. So when you're learning about history, whether it's slavery or something else, remember to think critically. Be open-minded, and most importantly, be compassionate.
That's great advice. Don't be afraid to ask questions and challenge what you think you know and look for different viewpoints.
That's how we learn and grow. The more we understand the past, the better we can handle the present and create a more just future.
This has been a really eye-opening deep dive. We've talked about some really complicated things, and I feel like I've learned so much about how we connect with history.
And if this conversation about white people invented slavery has gotten you thinking, keep exploring history. There are always more stories to find and more perspectives to learn from and more connections to make between then and now.
So keep asking questions, keep learning, and keep talking about these things. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.